Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Jen Perlman. She ran against Debbie Wasserman Schultz for Congress this year, and even though she didn't win, she's still very, very active on the progressive politics scene in Florida. And we'll see what the future holds. Jen, how are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for having me back on.
Yeah, definitely. I've been seeing you. You do more live streams than me now, so you're all over the place.
Yeah, I've got the slave master there.
Yeah, definitely. You're, I think, what's it called? Generational change?
Generational change.
Cool. We'll talk about that. So I wanted to start 360 view because, the corporate media is kind of rewriting what happened. They're pretending that Biden won some massive landslide, has a mandate, even though kind of narrowly won in most of the swing states. But I want to look at Florida. Florida seems to have been shifting to the right in recent elections. Obviously, the mini-me got elected, Ron DeSantis, and now Trump outperformed his 2016 in Florida, getting more votes than Florida. Is it Cubans in Miami? Is it Latinos breaking for Trump for some reason? Why is Florida seeming to be shifting to the right?
I never thought it wasn't to the right. So, growing up, Florida was always a red state. We were always a red state. And then there was like a couple of elections, I want to say like in the 80s or 70s, where maybe I know that it's called a swing state, but if you live here, it's pretty red. So I think first is that people constantly overestimate the size of the blue populace here, and the fact that our blue populace tends to be a very centrist blue populace. So it's not like there's really a tug to the left. It's just more of your Dixiecrat type of blues. So it's not blue. And then I do think the other factor is that our state Democratic Party and our local parties do absolutely nothing.
And let's getting a good segue to absolutely nothing. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who you challenged. And by the way, you lost, but it's not particularly easy to defeat incumbents during a pandemic where you can't really campaign. When you look at Cori Bush, this was her second time, so she had that name recognition you didn't have. So I think considering you couldn't really do traditional campaigning, which is important predominantly in your district down there that you were running, a lot of older voters, so they're not exactly, the easiest to cater to digitally. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is now being considered for House Appropriations Chair, I believe, which is insane to me because, obviously we have selective amnesia in America, but she was disgraced like not so long ago as DNC chair. She then was kind of backbenched after she resigned from DNC chair in the House Democratic caucus. And now suddenly, back to brunch. Biden is bringing back essentially the sleeping giants from the Obama administration. And now Debbie Wasserman Schultz is suddenly being considered for a pretty prime chairmanships. Why do you think they are now tapping into Debbie Wasserman Schultz again?
I think that there were three people, I think, in contention on that committee. The other two having actual, I believe, seniority over her. So I don't know that she's one of the people that is strongly contended. Or is it that the other two people are significantly older? Because that's something that I noticed as well. So the other two people that are in contention are a lot older, and maybe it's seen as she's really the only person that's up for it. That's in I honestly don't know. She ran the DNC into the ground. They lost 1,000 seats. They became beholden to the Clinton Foundation. I mean, why anybody would want to put her in charge of the money is beyond me. I don't even know why she's on that committee.
And what's amazing to me is Florida has been, just devastated by COVID. The whole country, but Florida in particular, Ron DeSantis has just, honestly, if we could charge politicians with criminal recklessness, he would be up there with keeping the beaches open for so long, bars, restaurants. But I haven't really, I don't follow DWS that much, but I haven't heard her talking about we need direct stimulus, a UBI, expanding healthcare, particularly for seniors during this. I've heard nothing. I mean, pretty much past the HEROES Act, which, yeah, I mean, on the surface would be helpful, but it, what is 1 trillion going to states and cities? We know a lot of that money traditionally, when it's earmarked for states and cities, somehow gets diverted to donors, nonprofits, real estate developers, slush funds. What is she proposing? Has she been, urging Biden to do more?
She doesn't propose anything. Like, I have never heard her propose anything. She doesn't address the climate issue. She has complained significantly about how COVID is handled, but I think that's predominantly because it's easy to blame the people, sort of like how I think Pelosi loves Trump being there. I think that Debbie likes having someone like DeSantis there, because then everything is on them. It's all their fault. We don't actually have to do anything. It lets the Mick resistance rest. But no, she doesn't, she's not out doing, I mean, she had her photo op yesterday doing her Thanksgiving volunteer work, but that's, I mean, she doesn't take charge of anything. I've not seen one thing that she's come out and done that is her taking initiative.
And she's not doing anything as the number of COVID cases in Florida, I'm just looking at it now, has tripled since the state reopened. I mean, obviously Rubio and Republicans aren't doing anything either, so it's kind of across the board. But you would think that somebody who is just reelected, has been there for 2 decades, I mean, dare I say, a safe seat until you run against her again, if you do, would have the room to call for more bold action, but she's not. And, it's disproportionately harming, Black people, Latinos down there in South Florida. And of course, seniors are most at risk. So it's truly, truly alarming. Wanted to also ask you about, on a broader scale, because you were a progressive candidate running against the machine during the pandemic. A lot of progressives are dejected right now. It really is kind of this back to the future in a bad way with, I mean, Biden is pretty much stacking his administration with it's like a 90210 reunion of Obama world. What would be your message to progressives, possibly people that were thinking of running in the next cycle, in terms of, can you move Joe Biden left? And how do you run a successful progressive campaign when the establishment's message is going to be, now's not the time to rock the boat. We have a narrow House majority. We can retake the Senate in 2022, because I don't think they're going to retake it this time with those Georgia runoffs. But there's going to be a lot of gaslighting against you and other progressives to not run or not rock the boat in terms of activism.
Yeah. There's 2 main parts of that for me that I see. First of all, no, we're not moving Joe anywhere. Joe's not going anywhere. He's not moving to the left. We're not making any inroads there. When I resigned myself to vote for Joe, which was not a proud moment, and at this point, the fact that Florida went red, I feel like I completely wasted my vote, but regardless, when I did that, I made this very conscious decision with myself that I have to spend the next 4 years making sure there's a primary in 4 years. So I think that what progressives need to be doing, one, is looking at this as, we need to actually work harder now that this is gone. It's like we're really trying to swim upstream even more. So I think that I understand it's hard not to feel dejected, but the other thing is that when you run in a campaign, and depending on how you run a campaign, the campaign is the movement in and of itself. I would urge, and that's really what we're promoting, is transforming politics into service. So the idea is, when you're running a campaign, you getting to that office is just one part of that campaign. The campaign itself is part of the movement. It's part of educating, it's part of spreading the word, and ideally it's part of doing community service locally. And so when you look at a campaign from the perspective of what it's really doing in building a movement, then when you don't necessarily win a seat, it's not a loss of everything else that you've done. So I really think it's important to look at the campaigns as part of the movement to keep it going, not at every individual win. And plus, the more inroads we make locally by doing those campaigns are going to affect us more so than people realize, because most things are local issues. So I just think that we have to look at it in terms of a grand movement and not so much as the individual seats that people are running for. And I think when you change that perspective, it doesn't feel as much of a loss as just a progress.
I also think in terms of organizing, whether it's organizing for a candidate or just organizing for issues, you're probably going to have a bigger pool now of persuadables because I mean, it's not just progressives out of work. It's not just progressives on those food lines. You see those massive lines stretching down the highway in Texas.
They're here.
I'm sure there's in Florida.
We did one yesterday. We served one yesterday and on Friday. There's one going on right now through one of the organizations we work with. Yeah.
So you might have people that either are naturally their disposition is to tune politics out, or naturally their disposition is to vote blue traditional Democrat, who are desperate, pissed off, and more susceptible to progressive language, progressive policies. So I would say now is the time, even neoliberals, maybe conservatives, who say, hey, I agree with Rubio and McConnell on the culture war nonsense, but what are they doing for me in my hour of desperation?
Yeah. Well, this is, one of the biggest things that I have been talking about is that this is not a red-blue thing. This is basically a management labor thing, or a haves and haves not thing, or a elite and a non-elite thing. So when you look at it from that perspective, the populism is rising in this country. It's rising on the left, it's rising on the right. And what concerned me in the first place about a Biden presidency is I have this thought that whoever is in office, it's going to be the other side that's festering and bubbling and working its way to take over at the next possible opportunity. And so in my mind, I thought, okay, well, if Biden's in there, that'll be the right populist movement will be swelling and building and gaining momentum. And so what we have to do now as the progressive people is we have to make our groundswell every bit as big as the right populist movement, because we have to come up with another solution in 4 years and not rely on whoever it is that the GOP, whether it's Mitt Romney or whoever it is that they're going to stick in front of us. And we need to be taking this very seriously right now and really working on what that's going to look like in 4 years.
And I'd like to ask you, because obviously it's a tough question because you couldn't campaign traditionally. But the bottom line is, I think on a state level, if you're running for senator, if you're running for House, and on the presidential level, progressives are going to need to figure out a way to slice off about 5-10% of the over 50 vote.
Yeah.
In your district, obviously, a lot of older people down in South Florida. Bernie, I think, I don't want to relitigate the whole primary, but Bernie, after Nevada, sail behind his wind, or whatever the phrase is, and he's on 60 Minutes, which is your prime viewership for older folks. And he got sucked into the Fidel Castro thing, which then got spiraled and all this. But he didn't really change his message in that position, or tweak his message. I'm not saying, sell out, but tweak his message to be a little bit more palatable to all these people that have been brainwashed against socialism and this and that. So for you, as somebody who frankly had to try and persuade traditionally older voters down there, what can progressives do? Because I just don't see a scenario where progressives on the congressional level, Senate level, but specifically the presidential level, of beating entrenched incumbents without starting to pick off some of these older voters.
Yeah, well, we have to. And the question really is do we pick off enough of them before they start dying off? Because what's really happening, which is the generational shift, is, in 2 years from now, that's 2 more years of, let's say, Debbie's voters that are going to die off. And that's 2 more years of people that are now coming out of school registering to vote. So at some point, there will be more of us. In the meantime, we do have to pick off some of them. And, look, I don't ever switch or change my policy positions or how I feel about issues. That never, that is what it is. But we do change our messaging. And I think that you do have to have different messages and different focal points of policy for different audiences. So, when we're talking to seniors, we're talking about removing the cap on Social Security and expanding Social Security benefits. And, that's more of the messages that appeal to them. But when you're talking about like the older Cubans and those people are Republicans. They're never so like they hear the word socialism or even, like anything and forget it. It's just not going to happen. But slowly but surely, I do think that with the right message, people are starting, especially when you plead to people about their grandchildren and great grandchildren's futures, because we're going to be underwater down here if we don't do something about it. And we have to switch away from fossil fuel. So, I mean, you just have to play at the heartstrings, I think, a little different for that crowd. But I don't think I think it's doable.
And I also think, frankly, hey, I'm no political strategist, but sometimes a little guilt helps.
Well,
I wish Bernie would have talked to those seniors and said, what about your grandchildren?
Well, that's what I do. I mean, it's guilt, but it's fact. It's fact-based. It's not some like hyperbolic scenario. It's we are seeing these problems right now. We're having major saltwater erosion in our infrastructure right now, and nothing's being done to build that up. So, this isn't far away. This is going to happen in these people's lifetime.
Absolutely. And last question. I mean, you're not the only progressive that didn't win this time, but what comes next for you? And, how should somebody who ran, whether Congressional, Senate, and didn't win this time, what should those people do? Is it continued activism? Is it announcing a run again for 2022 early? What are you doing, and what would be your suggestions for others?
Like I said, our campaign was always just a bigger movement. And so we've kept that going. We still have our Gen Core. We're doing our volunteer work. We've started Generational Change podcast to just keep building on our platform. I mean, that's all part of it. Campaigning is very much hugely about education. And so the more every single new person that learns about something, like I just did an interview with somebody about regenerative agriculture. Every new person who learns something new is now can be part of the solution. So that's what we're still doing. And as far as politically, this is something that, and I don't want, it's hard to say without it sounding a certain way, but running for office is not something that's for everybody. Okay. Like sort of like not everybody is necessarily qualified to be a brain surgeon. Not everybody is like, not everything is for everybody. And I think that when people are looking at what's in their best interest in terms of political ambition, you need to look at your location, your area. And are you really bringing something to the party that isn't already there? And by party, I mean, not political party. So like, are you bringing something new to the mix? And and this takes a lot of self-awareness. This is an exercise in self-awareness, because a lot of people want that job, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a good candidate. And it takes a lot to be a decent candidate. You have to be able to be very comfortable one-on-one with all different kinds of people, all walks of life. And not everybody is able to do that. Not everybody can flow seamlessly from a black tie gala to a fish fry in the church parking lot. Not everybody has that capability. And I think that when people have self-awareness and they think about, why am I running? Am I running because I truly think that I am somebody who is not only a needed change here, but is capable of doing that? Or is this just the job I want and I just want to get involved in politics? I think that, and this is sort of like people have to have their come to Jesus moment about what their intentions are and what they're trying to do. And so for me, it needs to happen organically. For me, when you run, it needs to be like a swelling that's coming from like a need, not just, I decide I want this job and now I'm going to sell it to the people. If you're running an organic campaign, you are the people. And so I just would encourage people, if you stay active and you keep doing what you're doing, you will know if it's an organic move or not, that if that's the step you should take, or if you're trying to squeeze a round peg into a square hole because you want that job.
Right.
And I think that that's a very big distinction. And I know it sounds kind of like I don't mean to sound condescending about it at all. Like I don't, but it's a fact. And now I've seen enough candidates that are in that kind of position, and you can't make people want that just because you want that.
Right, absolutely. And where could people find Generational Change? I think it's JENN.
Nope, just one N.
Oh, JEN, Racial Change.
Right.
Where could people find more?
Okay, so go to generationalchange.com, and also there, anybody who is local that is interested in volunteering with Gen Core, because it's a fun group of people and we do fun things, you can actually sign up there. But we are on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. You can find us. And I'm looking now, I'm getting involved with another group that's more to come on that might end up getting us on other outlets. I'm not sure. But right now, that's where we are. And you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at GenFL23.
Great. Thanks for catching up with us, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thanks, Jordan. Bye.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.